You know all the studies, I don't need to recite them, about how the arts contributes to better outcomes. Keeps kids in school who might otherwise drop out, improves student achievement, not just in the arts area, of course, but in other areas. The arts have a level playing field. Everyone's equal on the bandstand. You just got to work, you got to play. Everyone's equal in the art studio. And the arts are fun, and education is supposed to be fun, among other things. You are supposed to learn to work hard, but it's supposed to be fun as well. And yet the arts are still always in a state of trying to justify themselves, trying to justify their value. And lately there's been another narrative about the arts, that the arts promote creativity and that the arts are about problem solving. They teach creativity and problem solving, and nothing is more important to business and the job market in the future than problem solving and creativity in the workplace, especially for the jobs that we want rather than the jobs we don't want, the higher wage, higher income jobs. And nowhere is the need for creativity more pressing than in the field of education today. We're really in a state of crisis in this country. Student achievement has been flat in many, many ways. Our dropout rate nationally is around 25%, or I should say, our graduation rate is 75%. So something's happening to the other quarter of the students. Reporter from the Columbus Dispatch confronted me today and said, "Do you know that Columbus has dramatically reduced its dropout rate?" I said, "Really, what did they do?" And she says, "I don't know." So she's writing an article about it. So I said, well, it'd be good to find out. Look forward to your article tomorrow. But she asked me for a comment about it, and I said, well, it's important, it's great news, and I hope that we can replicate it somewhere else if we can figure out what exactly they did. But it's a crisis everywhere in the country. I mean, districts all over America, there are something like 16 or 18 or 100 or 2,000 high schools in America where barely 50% of the kids graduate. And solving that problem is going to require a lot of creativity. And it's creativity not at the federal level. It's not as if we can figure it out. And probably not even at the state level. It's going to be at the school level, at the district level. Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we see so much of that happening in education around the country. And that's why when we got a hold of some of this Recovery Act money, we set aside a little piece to promote innovation and to promote reform. And today I was out at Franklin West and met with Read and Recovery Program, which is one of the 4 biggest grantees of the Investing in Innovation competition that we launched this year. And it's research-based, it's proven, it's trying to go to scale, it's going to expand to 400,000 kids. So that's exactly the kind of thing that we're looking to see more of in education, because we have so many challenges and we just don't have enough people trying new things, changing the dynamics. Think of charter schools. It was, according to one history of the charter school movement, a gleam in Al Shanker's eye many, many years ago as a place to try new things, and then a group of parents in Minnesota acted upon themselves, and 25 years later we have, I don't know how many, 4,000 or something in the country, not all of them good. So they're challenged by scale-up issues as well, but we're lucky to have some of them, and they're showing that you can try different things. You can take a different model, and sometimes it'll work. TFA, another started with Wendy Kopp in college, and here we are, I don't know how many years later, 15 or 20 years later, and it's the #1 job applicant from Stanford, and 14% of Yale's graduating seniors applied to be a teacher. McKinsey just did a study that said that Finland only recruits from the top third of its college students to teach, whereas we largely recruit from the bottom third. And they asked, how could we change that? They didn't have great answers, I have to say. It was more like an informational study than it was a series of recommendations. But somehow Wendy Kopp figured out how to make teaching kind of sexy, even though people think that there are problems with TFA as well, that their dropout rate, the retention rate is low. Kids move on, they do it just to get the resume. And I'm sure some of that's true, but there's probably other factors as well. Teachers not feeling supported, getting into tough schools where the climate is not right. But fundamentally, driving this kind of innovation and change is what this administration is all about. And it really falls into three big areas, and I just want to walk through that a little bit. And then I look forward to getting into some Q&A, because I always find that's more valuable for me, and I think more interesting for you as well. Three areas come down to this. First is supporting pre-K through 12 reform. And I use that word carefully, chose that word carefully, supporting, because although we're at the federal government, we're a small piece of the pie, maybe 10% of education funding in America. And the work all happens at the state and really at the local level. And our job is just to support people, support you, support teachers, to do everything we can. And that's what we're trying to do with Race to the Top. That's what we're trying to do with the Investing in Innovation, with the school improvement grants to help turn around the lowest performing schools, with the teacher incentive fund grants to come up with new models for compensation, with the data grants to help states set up systems so that they can really track student growth and do a better job of evaluating teachers and figure out who's learning and who needs help and which teachers are being supported and which ones need more support and which ones are fantastic and could perhaps become lead teachers to help others become great teachers. So there's a lot we're doing there in supporting reform. The second thing we're doing, second big bucket of activity, is what we really consider to be the big game changer, and that's teachers themselves. And we really want to strengthen the teaching profession. We want to help renew the teaching profession. We want to lift the teaching profession as much as possible. We're doing that in a couple of ways. We started a big recruitment campaign. According to some analyses, 1 million teachers could be retiring in the next 5 years, and perhaps half of the 3.2 million teachers in the country could be retiring in the next decade. So we have this huge opportunity to bring in, 50% of the teaching force this decade. And how do we do it in a better way? How do we do it in a smarter way? How do we make sure that people who are really passionate about children and about learning are choosing this profession? How do we honor teachers? How do we elevate the profession? How do we restore the stature that it deserves? How do we give it the stature that other countries have given it, and that maybe it used to have at another time? I don't know. I'm only 53, so don't know what it was like, but I think it was always seen as an honored profession, and it should be. And so we'd like to help there. So first is pushing reform, the second is teaching, and the third one is college. So if you think you have a dropout rate in high school, you should look at the dropout rates in college. They're far worse. And of course, at that age, people drop out for a lot of different reasons, money as much as anything. But quite often they're not prepared. Something like 50 or 60% of the kids who go to community colleges need remedial education. And that means that we're not preparing them. We're giving them a high school degree, but we're not preparing them. Arnie says we're lying to children when we do that. We're lying to their parents. We're lying to everybody, saying that they're ready when they are not. So, among other things, we put a lot of money into college completion, more Pell Grants, more student loans. But we're also challenging the colleges to do a better job of supporting kids in college, helping them, keeping an eye on them, instead of sort of treating them like, just customers who come and go. And that's a big part of our job because, our economic future is very much tied to it. So you take those three areas of reform, take those three buckets of activity, reform, teachers, and college. And our vision is that over the next 2 to 3 years, we should systematically work to eliminate the barriers to reform. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. Everything from labor laws to, school board activities, to state laws, to funding problems, to whatever the barriers are to reform. We want to really attack them. Our goal over the next 5 years is to bring in 1 million new teachers, and our goal over the next 10 years is to get the percentage of young people with college degrees up from a little over 40% to closer to 60%, which is very ambitious. That would put us back in the lead in the world, assuming the rest of the world doesn't continue to push as hard as they are. We've gone from first, in one generation, we've gone from first in the world in terms of college completion to 9th in the world, tied for 9th with 2 other countries. So if we slip a little more, we'll be 12th. So that's a big thing. We think it's not just an educational issue, we think it's an economic security issue. The president's talked a lot about that. I've been in Washington now, I guess, about 20 months, and I've come to recognize what I think are three basic levers of change. The first is the bully pulpit, and Arnie and the president have both made ample use of it. The president used it for his weekly radio address last week. He's talked a lot about it. As they get into this sort of political season right now, you're hearing the president talk a lot about the fact that the push to go back to 2008 spending levels would mean that 8 million students would lose their student loans. So he's using the threat to education in a very, very direct way as something that's important. And so in his first year there, Secretary Duncan spent an awful lot of his time using the bully pulpit, challenging everybody, whether it was teacher unions, administrators, charter schools, he thanked them for what they have done, but then he would challenge them to go further because the status quo isn't nearly good enough. And so the bully pulpit is one of our big levers. Second one is transparency. And we talk a lot about what's wrong with NCLB, and that's a pretty long list of things, especially when you talk to teachers and educators and lots of people, really. But the one thing that NCLB, we think, got right was the commitment to disaggregating data and showing the achievement gap and forcing everyone to confront the truth about achievement gaps. It's really changed the conversation. And so we believe transparency is an important lever. One of the things we're doing in the higher education level is getting them to be transparent about costs, getting them to be more transparent about their dropout rates. Let's at least tell the truth. The same thing with the standards. Let's at least tell the truth. And if we can at least tell the truth and agree on the truth, then perhaps we can do something about it. And the third big lever of change, in my view, in our view, is carrots, incentives. We believe that they actually work a lot better than sanctions at the federal level. And I think the biggest story there really is Race to the Top. This $4 billion program, which was less than 1% of education spending in the country, has just driven a stunning amount of change in this country. 48 states got together and agreed to develop college and career-ready standards. 44 of them are now working on a new set of assessments, and hopefully these assessments will test creativity and will test problem-solving skills and will cross over into other areas of study besides just reading and math. 46 states applied for Race to the Top, and in applying, they were forced to sit down with all of their stakeholders and come up with a common agenda. And that alone was worth, was priceless, really. Union leaders and state chiefs, state education chiefs, governors, elected officials, state legislators, they had to sit down and talk about it. And you guys know, like every state, there's just no shortage of blame, finger-pointing in the education world. The teachers blame the parents blame the politicians blame the unions, and everybody keeps blaming each other. And they just don't force themselves to sit down together and work together. And that's what we have really, that's one of the big outcomes of Race to the Top, is that even the states that didn't win, not everybody's won like Ohio, as you know, but the states that didn't win now have this blueprint for reform. And if they hold it up, they all agreed to it, they all signed it. Now they can pursue it, maybe with other funding sources, maybe with other incentives we can provide. But just creating that was a tremendous achievement. We had 1,700 applications for innovation grants. We only funded 49 of them, including the one I visited this morning. But the fact that we have all that in hand, 1,700 proposals to do something bold and creative and innovative in education, is a great resource. So what we're trying to do now is take the next 100 and pair them up with philanthropies and see if they'll fund them. And then we're going to go back to Congress and see if we get some more money for them, because frankly, we think a lot of them are really worthy. We have about 500 schools in the country that now are in the process of turning around through these school improvement grants. Some of them are closing and reopening. Some of them are working with their existing staff. The work is happening. They've opened their doors this fall. Again, creativity, a lot of courage, a lot of hard work. In fact, we have a little video that we are going to show you about one of them down in Baton Rouge. And just to give you an example of the kind of things people are doing. And this one, in fact, does relate to the topic. So if we could roll that right now, that'd be great.
I'm always surprised when people have not heard of Forest Heights Academy. For it to be a public school and to offer what it offers, I wouldn't send my kid anywhere else.
Forest Heights is a totally different kind of environment. Education would be off the charts all over Baton Rouge if you could replicate Forest Heights.
So today we're doing Ringing in the Spring with the Arts. It's our spring arts review where we showcase our honor band, our honor choir, our talented drama kids, and our dance club. So you get the whole inclusive picture.
Forest Heights Academy of Excellence is a magnet school here in the East Baton Rouge Parish School District. A magnet school is a public school. It's a public school with a theme or focus. Of course, here at Forest Heights Academy, we're an academic, visual, and performing arts school. We serve pre-kindergarten through 5th grade students here.
Also, while you're working, think about the title that you're going to make for your artwork. Jasper Johns kept it pretty simple. He just stuck with map.
I like art because there's no wrong or right anymore. And like, you just express your feelings. If you mess up, you could make something out of it.
I look at visual and performing arts as a way of differentiating instruction. They can sing it, they can draw it, they can play it, or they can act it out. So that's a way of really making the learning come to life.
Well, the first thing we love about theater is the confidence that it builds. So that you feel safe being brave, pretending to be the prince. You even had to lean in and kiss somebody else in the class, which takes courage. Always theater is taking a risk. We take what they're learning in the classroom. We've been working on the science techniques, cause and effect. What happens on the stage as an actor, you have to react to not only your props, but also the action in the stage and the other actors in the scene. So we're always echoing what they're getting. And then that's the end, which means the end.
Right. If you classified it as erotic. With us being a visual and performing arts school, I always ask the kids and I tell them arts is not just in the arts building, that I want to see those things that they're learning in my classroom too. We do creative writing assignments. When we studied Adams, we did the Adams Family song, and the music teacher helped them to put it to music, so they actually used instruments, and they were playing that, and then they sung the Adams song.
I think Forest Heights, along with the visual and performing arts, definitely help our students to overcome obstacles. And our test scores here have progressed. We're a National Blue Ribbon School, and to become a National Blue Ribbon School, you must have 3 consecutive years of student growth. And that simply means, regardless of your socioeconomic background, you can be successful in your area of education.
Our daughter Brianna is a first grader here. I can see where she was extremely shy, but all the arts is building her self-esteem. You can see where she's accomplishing things and being successful.
The infusion of the visual and performing arts in collaboration with the core curriculum, it works. We've seen it here. We have the scores to prove that. The students are engaged. They enjoy being here. It works.
Everybody now is so worried about private school versus public schools. This is a phenomenal public school, and I'm very proud to say that my child goes here.
There you go. So that's on YouTube. So if you want to use it or share it, you're welcome to, no charge. So we have some challenges, as I said before, and I have some particular challenges in terms of the story that we're trying to tell at the federal level. There's not a lot of love for No Child Left Behind, and it's our job to reauthorize the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is the formal name of that law. And we are going to rename it, just so you know. But, Don't Child Left Behind launched this era of accountability. And, a lot of people correctly pointed out that that kind of accountability, test-based accountability, leads to narrowing of the curriculum. I heard that from a group of arts teachers that I talked with today, and I've heard it 1,000 times before as well. On the other hand, the absence of accountability created the sort of neglectful situation that prompted, a nation at risk from 1983, and prompted the Elementary Secondary Act in 1965, and even prompted Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. So we need some kind of accountability, but we can get a lot better with it. We can measure growth instead of just proficiency. We need a meaningful way to evaluate teachers to help them get better. I don't know if you followed that little dust-up in LA over the last few weeks, where they printed the value-added scores about some teachers, but it got a lot of people worked up. And we've always said, no, we should have multiple measures for teachers. But one of the questions I didn't get to bring up today with these arts teachers, which was, how should we evaluate art teachers? How do you do it? Is it student enthusiasm? How do you measure that? We have the problem of taking good ideas to scale. As I mentioned before, charter schools are terrific, but by some accounts, 70 or 80% of them are not doing any better or doing considerably worse than regular schools. So that's a challenge for the charter school movement. We have the challenge of trying to engage parents, especially the parents of children who are most at risk. We don't know how to reach them. We can't reach them. People don't come to the Department of Education for information about their school. They go to their school website, and sometimes schools are not as welcoming as they need to be. We have a tough economy, and that means that education is at risk like every other function of government. And of course, within education, the arts are especially at risk. And of course, we have politics. It's always part of the story as well. In our case, we have folks on one side folks on the left who want to see more and more funding, and we're certainly for more funding. We enjoyed having that extra $100 billion from the Recovery Act. It sure made us popular. But on the right, we have the constant fear of overreaching. Education is a state and local issue, so no, we don't have national standards. We have college and career-ready standards that were developed by the states voluntarily. And no, we don't set curriculum. Nope, that's not our job. Our job is just to support local educators as they do that. Even if they want to launch a debate about evolution versus religion or whatever, or creationism, it's not our position to weigh in and step in. We're supposed to leave that alone. So we have to walk a delicate line and make sure that we're just doing exactly what Congress asked us to do. But for a lot of reasons, Arnie's very hopeful. I'm very hopeful. The president is very hopeful. He really wants to make this his legacy. He talks about it all the time. Given that he's had 2 wars to fight and the worst economy since the Depression, he's done quite a few things that go beyond those 2 big crises, and education is one of them. We were, I think, the only agency that was given an increase in the proposed 2011 budget, the only domestic agency. We think that our teacher unions are more willing than ever before to collaborate and change. In fact, just today, the Secretary was in Florida with Randy Weingarten and Dennis Van Roekel, the head of the NEA and the head of the AFT. And they announced that we're going to do a big conference in Washington to talk about progressive labor agreements around the country and how we can, look at labor agreements and look at labor laws and ask whether they're helping or hurting kids, whether they can be changed. How do we do it in a way that's fair to teachers and good for kids? How do we build in evaluation? How do we build in seniority, tenure, all those issues? What's the best way to do that? And for the longest time, you weren't even allowed to talk about those issues without starting a war. But we think that there's a much better spirit of conversation underway. We think that the reform movement itself has reached a new phase. There's a lot of proven strategies today that there weren't 20 years ago. Charters being one of them, performance pay being another one. We're learning a lot about that. Sort of some of the early models of performance pay are not very successful, but some of the different ones, some of the new ones, they're folding in where the whole school is being rewarded, are showing more promise. And we'd like to continue to experiment with those ideas and be innovative and try things. People on both sides of the aisle want action in Congress. This is one issue that really does have bipartisan potential. States and districts are desperate for this kind of change. Ohio is not unique. States all over the country were really eager to try and compete for race to the top. The districts were really eager to compete for I-3. So there's just a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of buzz going on around education right now. And I think one of the biggest factors is that people understand the link between education and our economy, education in the future, and education in their kids. For elected officials, this is becoming more of a voting issue than it ever was before. Communities see schools as their anchors. Homeowners link schools in their home values. I think everybody's just starting to see the picture and realize this is the path out of poverty. This is the path to equality. This is the path to economic security. And so we think that's all good. We talk a lot about how everybody has a responsibility to education, whether you have kids or not, whether you're an elected official, whether you're a head of a school board or not, you have a responsibility. If you're in the union, if you're in a charter school, you have a responsibility. If you're a parent, you have a responsibility. And even kids. The president has spoken that to students now 2 years in a row and told them that they're responsible. They're responsible for their education. And we believe that our future is fully tied to education. We think it's tied to a well-rounded education. We think that our success as a country relies on our ability of producing a new generation of kids who are grounded not just in math and reading, but in everything, including the arts. So to answer the question, who cares about poetry? We care about poetry. But the truth is that anyone who's really interested in the human condition should care about poetry. I would say that you can learn as much about the human condition from biology as you can from T.S. Eliot. And it tells us what makes us tick. The scientist holds the microscope up to nature, but as Shakespeare said, the artist holds the mirror up to nature. And both are very important. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for the work you do in education, the work you do with children. We think it's society's most important work, and we're committed to doing everything we can at the federal level to support it, to incentivize change, to foster a climate of creativity and innovation, and to bring good ideas out and try new things and let the and let creative people at every level, but especially at the local level, thrive and succeed. So thanks very much, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cunningham. Enjoyed that enormously. You touched upon a very important part of, I think, both our current and our future crisis with respect to education, and that is the recruitment of our best and our brightest into education. Historically, if you go back, and if you were as old as I am, which you're not, I was taught by the best and the brightest people in our society. These were women who were denied the opportunity to join other professions. So at that time, very cheaply, we could get the absolute best people in our society into K through 12 teaching. Today, that's not possible. I'm a law professor here at Ohio State. I look out at my first year class this year, 60% of the students were women. 40 years ago, virtually every one of those women would have been a K through 12 teacher just about. But today, they can go to law school and they can start, if they do well, at $160,000 to $180,000 a year their first day out of law school. Teachers can't do that. We need to start figuring out ways to recruit the very best back into our schools again. There are many, and I would argue a lot of them are in this room, there are many, many good teachers out there that are not baby boomers, that are younger than baby boomers, but we're losing the baby boomer generation, as you said. I see a big federal role here. We've got war academies, we have Air Force academies, we have Coast Guard academies, we have naval academies, we have Army academies. Why don't we have a teaching academy? Why don't we nationally set up teaching academies to attract our best and brightest to go into teaching and provide them with the support and the best practices and the evidence-based teaching methods and get our very best people. States really can't do that because we're afraid if we set it up in Ohio, those teachers may go off to North Carolina, to Florida, to Indiana, to Pennsylvania. But at the national level, I just can't think of a more compelling thing for our federal government to do. I appreciate your response.
So I don't disagree. I think it's a good idea. We actually had a conversation once about creating a principals academy. That was the reaction we got. No, we thought that school leaders were very important, but I don't think it's a bad idea. We do have 1,300 schools of education in the country. I think that, so I don't know whether a lot of them some of them are terrific, a lot of them are not terrific. It's another sort of segment of the education industry that hasn't sort of changed with the times. And I'm generalizing, but I think a lot of teachers we talk to say, I wasn't prepared when I came out of this. Now maybe, the only preparation is to spend 3 years, before you really get the hang of it. But I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm not here to promise you that we jump right out the door and do it, but we absolutely need to do more to get great teachers in. And you raised the other issue of money, which is, a tough issue. What should teachers get paid? We absolutely believe they should be paid a lot more, and we should be a lot more creative with the way we pay them. I know that historically there's been a belief that performance pay isn't the right thing to do. Maybe there's other things, there's other ways to really incentivize teachers. And I know that teachers don't generally go into the field to make money, but they have financial needs like everyone else, and they ought to be rewarded for their work. Yep.
This has been a day to talk about creativity, and I guess the puzzle I have is that when I look at the best and the brightest, I see people who have been taught to be conformist. They've taught to do well in SATs. They've taught to not take a risk because they might get a B+ instead of an A. And I look at students who are in art schools, and they're the ones who seem to have said, I'm going to opt out of it. They tend to get lower grades, not because they're not capable, but because they wanted to experiment or do things differently. So I'd like to get a sense of, when we're talking about accountability and achievement, what are we trying to accomplish? Because when we talk about accountability, it's generally doing well on tests. And I understand the issue of too much tests, and believe me, in grade school you should see the stress when testing time comes. But creativity just seems to me to be somewhat going in a different direction than this notion of, let's get more people to graduate from high school. Let's get more people to go. Earlier in the panel, I was really struck. I wish we'd heard more about what are we talking about creativity from people who spend 2 years doing an internship, learning to do exactly what their supervisor told them to do, and then spend 3 years doing exactly in a residency what they were told to do. I don't see that's where creativity is. It's the people who opted out of the system where I see creativity. And I'd like to know how you're trying to try to merge these two different things.
Well, as I said, we're putting more money into what we call a well-rounded curriculum, but it's really a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's $265 million, which isn't a lot of money for the country. I think that we need a new accountability system that recognizes and measures in some way, or at least gives credit to those qualities that you're talking about: the ability to problem solve, the ability to collaborate, the ability to critical thinking. And frankly, that's going to require creativity itself for people to develop those systems. I mean, what's troubling policymakers always is, are we getting better or not? International tests suggest that we're not in some ways. And so then we get, we look long term at our country and say, well, what's going to happen to our country? We're not producing the people who are going to come up with the new products and the new ideas. So, I don't have a simple answer. As I said before, I don't think we're going to get rid of testing completely, but maybe we can get a lot smarter about it. And if we could, that would change behavior at the local level, because if we're being smarter about it, people would be smarter about what they're teaching and less pressure to teach to the test. So I know that's not a great answer. Yes?
I think the man who just spoke had some really good points. And I'm afraid that having a teacher academy would be a terrible idea. I have a MAT from Simmons College, and it was worthless, just worthless. I was depressed, overweight, miserable when I was in that program. It was really, it was just totally worthless. I have a bachelor's and I have a Master of Fine Arts, and those were worthwhile endeavors. But you know, and I'm teaching in a college that has a very good education program, I guess. But none of the people in that department have any idea what constitutes a good art teacher. No idea at all. They'll go into a class, you know, one of the student teachers is, you know, teaching art, and they will go into that class and they won't even notice that the supervising teacher is terrible, that she's not encouraging creativity. I mean, I call so many of the art teachers in my town are creativity killers. The one good one is sitting right next to me. And she's here, you know, she's here. The others don't care at all.
So let me ask you a question. What would you do about that if you were an administrator?
Well, if I were you know, you do need a principal academy, and that academy.
All right, we have some support from our.
Yeah, right. You need to educate.
You two guys will debate this out, and.
You know, people in other disciplines need to understand that what constitutes good art teaching is encouraging creativity, among other things. But, you know, most art teachers are being just cranked out, and they seem like they're burned out at the moment they begin. And they're teaching kids to do this cookie cutter stuff where they're not even allowed to be creative. I mean, I wish I could have pulled my two boys out of the art class in their elementary school and said, no, they can't go, because it was so depressing. You know, there was never anything creative done there. And then I'd ask, well, where's the creativity in this lesson? Well, they were allowed to pick the primary color they wanted to use. Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, there's some great teachers, but they're not understood.
Do you want to start right there, and then we'll work our way over the other part of the room? Or is there another mic over there?
Mr. Cunningham, you don't have a simple answer, but I do.
Where's my pen? I'm going to write this down.
I didn't start teaching until I was 45 years old. My background is as a purchasing manager. And I started teaching high school English. And in the past 7 years, I have this observation to make. It is highly anecdotal, but I think data will back me up. My brightest and best students, who score highest on the SAT, who score highest on the ACT, who get 3s, 4s, and 5s in our AP courses, are dancers, musicians, and artists.
So if you want high test scores, teach the arts. Is that
You
it?
do not win a football game by staring at the scoreboard. You win a football game by what happens in preparation. And the arts are preparation for excellence. And if we are doing anything but demanding excellence from our students, we're wasting our time.
All right. Go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you for being here tonight. It's right now, with all the conversations going on about education and, you know, what's being said at the national level and waiting for Superman and all of that, teacher bashing is something that is in vogue again. And I would also like to say, in terms of principals, and I'm involved in Twitter and an educational PLN, which is on Twitter, at EdChat, 3,000 teachers nationally and internationally who speak every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. about this issue. That principals also need to be elevated and need to be supported. They were also brought up in a system, I'm a teacher, but principals were also brought up in the same system that we are. We can only do what we have been taught. And most of us in this room have been taught in the cookie cutter 19th century model of education. So I think that, to bring in new ideas and to support every level of educator, regardless if it's the art teacher, the librarian, or the principal, is very, very important. And we all need to be working together. As somebody said over here, well, they don't know what we do. Well, I think that's part of it. We all need to come out of our classroom, we all need to come out of our office, and we all need to step into each other's shoes occasionally and to cross-train, to see what it's like to be in other people's shoes. The other really concerning issue that I have, and I'm asking this to you, is that I see that we're upholding the ideas of creativity and 21st century skills. Ohio is a 21st century skill state, and my concern is that when I look at the Common Core, and I have been involved with the revision of the English language arts curriculum for the past 3 years, English teacher of 17 years, and I see what was developed by Ohio Department of Education and the ELA department, and then what has happened because of Race to the Top. I do unfortunately see a narrowed curriculum from what I did see to what I'm seeing now, and I've been working hours and hours on this, not nearly as long as the people at the State Department. And I know we're all in agreement that education it should not be a political issue, and I don't think everybody agrees with that. But my concern is that I see teachers out there trying to follow a checklist of things that are the standards. And then I see a new set of standards coming in that are going to take like 3 years or so to implement. But yet, it's still, where is that? And I was in private school for a year last year. There is so much more latitude given to a teacher considering he or she is a professional. And that to me is more important than salary any day. Treat me as a person who knows what I am doing. I do know what I'm doing. And give me the opportunity to be creative, because I don't have that now, and I'm not going to have it with Common Core. I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel.
Okay.
First and foremost, I want to appreciate the fact that you have to receive the whole spectrum of responses, because I think education touches the core of all of us as a society, and it's a proxy conversation for everything else, as well as a focus on education. And so I appreciate the fact that you have to receive, right? I also want to say that I think you take a very complicated moving target and make it palatable. Even if it's not a perfect solution, you do a really fine job, and I appreciate it. And I've never met you and wasn't expecting necessarily to feel that way tonight, but and that's not an easy job for anybody, so I appreciate your style, personally. I have a question, and I'm going to go to the Wendy Kopp kind of Teach for America bit. And I appreciate the fact that you focused on, and I think it was a massive explosion in the middle of your talk that got very little attention. If 50% of our current workforce that call themselves teachers are going to retire within a decade, right? And anecdotally and somewhat statistically, it gets bandied around that 50% of educators are gone within the first 5 years of their career, leave the active day-to-day of teaching.
Yeah.
All right. This is the most exciting time in the world to reimagine education, because the whole thing's going to change whether we want to change it or not. It's just going to. In 10 years, the whole game is going to be up for grabs. But here's what I'm looking at. Most of the models of innovation that are looked at from a corporate, funding, non-for-profit, federal, national, state, all are unsustainable in terms of the long-term professional role. Great if you're 25 without kids and a family. Great if you want to spend 4 years founding a school. Great if you want to do 2 years for Teach for America before you go to law school. It's no wonder that 30% of Yale undergrads want to do it. I would gather the vast majority don't see themselves teaching in 5 years, no matter how successful that 2-year run is. Right. So what I'm curious about is not that is the problem, but most of our really passionate exemplars are non-replicable, non-sustainable, and don't show a replacement strategy. If 50% of our professionals are going to exit, there is no replacement for them that are going to be in the industry for more than 2 years, 5 years, maybe 10. So I'm curious in terms of long-term scenarios, and I'm not looking for one program to be the savior, but I'm curious in terms of how you all look at what it's going to look like past not just this administration, but several, what it's going to look like if there's no replacement wave staying more than 2, 3, 5 years, let alone becoming wise, long-term professionals of any level of integrity, not A level, even C- level.
Yeah.
What is your look from the federal standpoint?
Well,
on the record, off the record, on that.
Yeah, on the record. Everything's on the record. You know, what is it? The Chinese symbol of crisis and opportunity is the same word. So we see this as an opportunity. If what you say happens, and I'm not saying it's not going to happen, and we think the opportunity will turn into a crisis, and people have a different way of responding to a crisis. I think that, as I said before, I think teachers should be paid more. I think that in a more professionalized atmosphere, they could be paid more. And if they're paid more, I think that'll support the dynamic. That'll get more people into the profession. If they're treated well, if we have 95,000 principals in America, if more of them know how to create the right culture that allows for creativity in the classroom, you're going to have lower turnover rates. But if we continue to do the kinds of things we do, especially in the lowest performing schools, things are going to get worse. I don't have an answer for that. All we can do is highlight success where we see it, incentivize it where we don't see it, and hope that better outcomes will start to emerge. There's no surefire formula here. All I know is that we're leaving a lot of kids in the dust here. A lot of kids are graduating with high school degrees that don't prepare them. So I'll jump to you, sir. I know we're running out of time here.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned something about getting involved in the local level of what's going on. But prior to that, you said something that really caught my attention. You said you don't want to get involved in evolution versus creationism. Now, if you've got a local school district dominated by fundamentalists who want to teach that the earth is 10,000 years old and that humans hunted dinosaurs, I mean, that's a prescription for disaster, not just for that district, but for our country as a whole. That you've got to do the right thing, not just what is politically expedient and what goes over and makes the less waves, but what is actually correct, what is right, what do scientists know, not teach religious beliefs in a science classroom.
Well, I would say we put our money where our mouth is. We spend a lot more on STEM education than we do on creationism. But I appreciate the point. We actually did weigh in on the Texas one. But just on a bully pulpit level, the secretary did issue a statement about the importance of having, of science. Now, for us to go to another level and actually do something about it, like intervene, would be probably a level of activism that we haven't contemplated just yet. To be honest. Okay.
And I guess it's a question and a comment. During the course of the day, I've heard a lot about creativity. And I guess we're in a venue where I would expect to hear a lot about creativity in the arts. But as a science person, we're also creative. And I would submit that part of why this country is so great is because of those scientific creative moments. And we worked with, or at least we try to work with, our counterparts in the arts department because what you bring to the table is important, but also what we bring to the table is important. The question for me is not who cares about poetry or who cares about astronomy, but how do we work together so that we produce children who care about it all, who can find what's best for them and create a stronger America. That's kind of my...
And I would just say, find great people, put them in the classroom, empower them, and try to stay out of their way. So, thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for having me.